for yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. Remember, this is the remix. It's not supposed to happen exactly. It's always with a twist. And then you had these vocabulary words, like I said, literary devices, or even like brushstrokes that allude back to earlier stories that help you understand the terminology. Good evening. Happy after the Sabbath day. And shalom, shalom. Welcome back to Study the Bible, Not the Sermon TV. If this is your first time here, welcome to where we have come to understand strange Bible stories. If you move by something you hear or read or see while you're here, please smash the like button, hit subscribe, and slide on the notifications bell. If you're a regular here, please drop me a comment so I can shout you out on the next joint. 100. Today, here in the story of Joseph, we are on the back end of Genesis. And although we come to the end of the road, still I can't let go. But I'm going to have to. This is our final installment of Genesis 1 verse 2 Uncreation Comparison Sub-Series. I might throw some prophecies in it next week, but as for going through every story of uncreation from the book of Genesis, it's over. So for today, firstly, in Genesis chapter 41, Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, has a dream. Starting in verse 1, isn't it amazing that at the beginning of the dream, Pharaoh stands in a body of water? And if you don't know by now, on this channel, when we read about things that happen in, on, or around, or in relationship to bodies of water, you already know I'm going to be in my back. Then he has a dream about cattle that come out of the water. Hopefully you still think in Genesis 1. And so fat cattle, and then after them, some sick and skinny cattle come up. Then the sick and skinny cattle eat the fat cattle, but they don't get any bigger. Still looks sick and skinny. Right? This dream, if you have not guessed it yet, referencing the cycle from Genesis 1 verse 2. But then, as Pharaoh has a second dream talking about ears of corn that are very similar to the cows in the first dream, Joseph reveals to Pharaoh that the dreams are one and the same. But the second dream is a reference actually back to Genesis chapter 2. Now, here on the Slow Genesis walkthrough, we ain't made it past the second verse of chapter 1. So guaranteed chapter 2 references might be a little bit beyond us. But I made reference before that chapter 2 is the creation from a different point of view. Chapter 1 is the earth with too much water. Chapter 2 is the earth as in not enough water. Right? Think about that verse that said it has not rained on the earth yet. In verse 46, it says that Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Anybody think that's a coincidence that he was the age that the priests have to be to start their ministry? That would mean it's also coincidental that he talked about things that would be brought up later and developed in the book of Leviticus. Like he didn't take land from the priests in Egypt and the people given a portion back. But anyway, stay focused. In verse 49, it says Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much until he left numbering, for it was without number. Obviously, they want us to think about Abraham here and meditate on the similarities between Abraham and his great-grandson. But this is the beginning of Joseph gathering or collecting things into his ark. Now you might say, what ark? There's no boat or house or anything here. It is the ark of his protection. The flood is going to come and the people connected to Joseph will survive, including Pharaoh, including the people of Egypt, including the surrounding areas, and including his family still in Canaan. Then verse 56, and it says, and the famine was over all the face of the earth. Come on, y'all. Over the face of the whole earth. And that's what I be talking about. Explanations for strange things in the Bible. Make sure you hit that like button. It says the face of the whole earth. And we take that like it's people in Persia, people in Babylon, people in Australia, the people in North America, Antarctica. There was a famine over every single spot of dirt on the earth. And actually, no, this is a literary device. This phrase is connecting you to Noah's flood. Right? Remember, I feel like we read it on this show. If not, let's read it now. Chapter 7 and verse 4. And it says, for yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. Remember, this is the remix. It's not supposed to happen exactly. It's always with a twist. And then you had these vocabulary words, like I said, literary devices, or even like brushstrokes that allude back to earlier stories that help you understand the terminology. It even serves as a help for memorization. Right? Now, back to Genesis 41. The rest of verse 57 says, Joseph was the one who laid up all the food in his makeshift arks all over Egypt when people came to buy food. The story continues in chapter 47 and verse 6. Pharaoh actually blessed Israel. Verse 12 says, and Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all his father's household with bread according to their families. And there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very sore in the land of Egypt, and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. Now, if you keep reading down after verse 17, Joseph begins to collect cattle, flocks, and herds. All the way down to verse 24, he is effectively Noah, saving all the animals into his ark. And then verse 25, it says, the people said, save our lives. Right? So the people were saved according to the righteous remnant that God chose. Verse 17, and they brought Joseph. He gave them bread in exchange for their flocks and cattle and herds. And he fed them with bread for all their cattle that year. And then finally in verse 27, it says, and Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions therein and grew and multiplied exceedingly, just like the remnant that saved out of the flood. In this particular case, the whole land of Egypt is the remnant saved out of the flood, right? And then Israel and everybody is reborn. And we'll find when we get in the book of Exodus that Egypt will be faced with the test about how they will respond to God's chosen, like Cain, and they will respond in the wrong way. They will curse God's people, and God will bring a flood on the land of Egypt and bring Israel out as the sole remnant on the other side. It's a marvelous story the scripture got here. Hopefully someone was able to follow along this process and is able to glean some understanding about what the scripture is trying to get us to see. Ultimately, the Bible is trying to shape our minds and get us to see our lives as this constant cycle where you bring violence and destruction in your own life, and eventually God has to bring the flood so that he can bring you through the flood in a new life as a remnant chosen. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This is Study the Bible, Not the Sermon TV. I am Brother Nicodemus O. Smith. This is the slow walkthrough. And this is the flood of a famine. Check us out next week as we continue and finally make it past verse 3 of chapter 1 in the slow Genesis walkthrough. This is Study the Bible, Not the Sermon TV, and this is Mehala, the slow Genesis walkthrough. And this is the flood of a famine. And we up.